based on their receipt of other low-income aid.
So basically,
Washington Journal live every day at 7 a.m. Eastern and in our video library at cspan.org. We're breaking away here for the U.S. House. They're gaveling in next for legislative work, which will include the rule for a bill that cuts $40 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the federal food stamp program, over 10 years. Also today, work on the rule for the continuing resolution, the 3-month spending bill continuing federal spending past September 30th, the end of the fiscal year 2013. Attached to that bill is a language that defunds or eliminates any funding for the health care law. Live coverage of the House here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Bishop Jerry Macklin, Glad Tidings Church, Hayward, California.
Shall we pray? God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast led us thus far along the way, for this land of freedom and the promise of America, we are thankful. In the face of daunting tasks, monumental and complex changes, grant this, the 113th Congress, your sovereign wisdom. Allow this august body, like eagles, to soar above partisan disagreements and personal agendas. Grant the members of the House of Representatives strength that they may run for those whose legs are weak, and give them courage that they may walk for those who have become weary through years of injustice. Give them compassion that they may speak for those whose voices have been silenced, and God, grant them vision for those whose dreams are diminished. Now, God, empower America with a unity that defies the chaos of the moment. Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever. In the path we pray, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
The Chair has examined a journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved.
Mr.
For
Speaker.
what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal? Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved.
Mr.
Gentlelady
Speaker,
from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentlelady from California, Ms. Chu.
Please place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from California, Mr. Smallwell, is recognized for 1 minute.
With this House at this moment considering such important issues for the American people, there is no better person I know than Bishop Jerry Macklin to deliver this afternoon's opening prayer. Bishop Macklin's words are inspiring, and his call for national unity and wisdom during these trying times is appropriate. Bishop Macklin knows a thing or two about trying times. He founded Glad Tidings Church in Hayward, California in 1978. With a big heart of compassion and a deep devotion to the Lord, Bishop Macklin turned a neighborhood overrun by drugs and crime into a community of faith. Today, Glad Tidings Church has over 1,500 members. Under Bishop Macklin's leadership, the church is not just a place to worship, but a center point for care to the community, providing food, affordable housing, and health care to the most in need among us. Just 2 weeks ago, Bishop Macklin opened his church's doors to host an Affordable Care Act forum to help educate my constituents. As the Regional Health and Human Services Director was explaining to the attendees where they could sign up, I saw firsthand Bishop Macklin's commitment to serve the community. He leaned over to me and said, "Eric, our church needs to be at the center of signing people up." And by the time the regional director had finished addressing the attendees, Bishop Macklin had already texted and emailed about a dozen people to make sure that happened. Thank you, Bishop Macklin, for asking God to watch over this house and for your work to watch over our community.
The chair will entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 5 years. That's how long the Keystone XL pipeline and the 40,000 jobs it's expected to create have been waiting for President Obama's approval. There is no good reason for this delay. Americans need these jobs. Democrats, Republicans, and organized labor groups have coalesced in support of the Keystone XL pipeline because it will spur job creation, help us on our way to energy independence, and increase access to affordable North American oil. Ask any mom responsible for balancing the family checkbook whether affordable energy matters to her. It does. Keystone XL is the most studied pipeline in our nation's history. Thousands of pages prove its worth to our economy and national interest and further document its safety. On this 5th anniversary of Keystone's original application, it's time for the President to put his excuses aside. It's time to build. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Once again, House Republicans have put struggling families on the chopping block. They're cutting SNAP, our nutrition program, by nearly $40 billion. Millions of Americans will completely lose their assistance or see their monthly benefits drastically cut. More than 8,000 families in my community will risk going hungry. These cuts hurt working families who struggle every day to put food on the table. They end benefits for people who want to work but can't find a job, even mothers with young children. They eliminate a vital safety net for many adults who are out of work. These cuts hurt children, seniors, and veterans, all of whom rely on SNAP to survive. Where are these millions of Americans supposed to turn to for food? It's time for the Republican leadership to stop playing games with the most vulnerable amongst us. They are literally taking the food out of hungry kids' mouths.
Gentlelady yields back. What purpose does the gentlelady from South Dakota seek recognition?
I seek to address the House for 1 minute. Unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to recognize the courageous actions of Kelly German and Hazel Thompson of Watertown, South Dakota. On the night of August 6, 2013, Kelly and Hazel helped save the lives of over 40 elderly men and women at a retirement home in Watertown. A fire started in one of the apartments late in the evening, and one of the residents, Hazel, heard yelling down the hall and immediately informed Kelly German, the night manager, that the building was on fire. Kelly promptly called 911 and immediately began knocking on tenants' doors, many of whom were sleeping. Knowing that many of the doors were locked and many of the residents were hard of hearing and slightly immobile, Kelly ran back to her apartment to get the master key. She then resumed knocking on and opening every door to waken the residents and rush them out of the building. Without the quick action of Hazel and the heroics of Kelly and the local firefighters in Watertown, many would have lost their lives that night. This story is of special significance to me because Kelly is also a member of my staff and lost everything she owns in that fire. Residents of the home, the community of Watertown, and I will be forever grateful for her selfless act. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. What purpose does the gentlelady from Oregon seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Millions of Americans rely on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program to put food on the table. But H.R. 3102, which we'll consider later today, will let families in our districts go hungry. The cuts contained in the bill could leave behind about 120,000 Oregonians who are still struggling to recover from the recession. That's a huge number and will reverberate throughout our communities. Some might say that charitable institutions can make up the difference, but that's just not so. They're already struggling to meet demand. Without SNAP, millions of Americans will go hungry, plain and simple. We shouldn't be trying to balance the budget on the backs of hungry families. The bill that will be up today outright abandons them. If we're really concerned about the cost of SNAP, we should focus on addressing the root causes of hunger. Let's cut poverty, not nutrition assistance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to congratulate the 5 scientists receiving the Golden Goose Award later today. The Golden Goose Award was created to recognize the important impact of federally funded research on the lives of Americans today. This award highlights seemingly obscure research that has led to unexpected advances in unrelated fields, sometimes years after the original work took place. The beauty of research science is that we can never truly predict what discoveries can result from just a slightly better understanding of our world. Dr. John Eng conducted studies on the venom of Gila monsters, which led to diabetes medication which millions of patients now use. Mathematician Lloyd Shapley developed algorithms to maximize marriage stability in the 1960s, which were then used by economist Alvin Roth to match kidney recipients with patients and doctors with hospitals. Dr. Thomas Brock and Dr. Hudson Freeze studied organisms in the extreme conditions of Yellowstone Park, and their research led to a better understanding of the heat necessary to study DNA, which then fueled advances in biotechnology and the genomics revolution. Far from laying a golden goose egg, these golden goose recipients have changed our world for the better. We recognize their work. I yield back.
Yields back. What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, over 68,000 Ventura County residents in my district rely on SNAP benefits to make ends meet and put food on the table. More than half of those 68,000 people are children. The bill before us today won't create jobs or improve our economy. It simply makes it harder for families, including our nation's veterans, to feed their children. From 2008 to 2011, SNAP food purchases tripled at commissaries throughout the country, which are open to military families and veterans. Currently, 900,000 veterans across the country receive SNAP benefits. Under H.R. 3102, benefits would be cut for as many as 170,000 veterans. Some would lose their benefits entirely. A vote for this bill is a vote to let millions of children, seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans go hungry. I urge my colleagues to join me in fighting hunger in America by opposing this bill. I yield back my time.
The gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition? The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, from time to time this chamber has the opportunity to address legislation that will have an impact on generations of Americans. Since arriving in Congress, I have consistently supported efforts to defund or to repeal Obamacare. Not only does this law run contrary to our basic American principles of personal freedom and limited government, it is already hurting our economy, and it will be even more destructive as it is implemented this fall. As a small business owner, I have seen firsthand and in a very personal way the negative impacts of this law. It is no wonder that it is so unpopular. The original purpose of the Affordable Care Act was to drive health care costs down, but instead it has done exactly the opposite, driving up premiums by as much as 400%. We can do better. We must replace this law with legislation that will lower health care costs and improve the quality of care and protect American jobs. I look forward to voting in favor of the continuing resolution this week, which defunds this damaging health care law. The Senate and the House can work together to find a constructive and an alternative that would fix and improve our, and I look forward to working with them to do that. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition? Gentlelady from Texas recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the Nutrition Reform and Work Opportunity Act. The GOP's efforts to cut $40 billion in SNAP benefits over 10 years show how disconnected they are with our most vulnerable citizens. 4 to 6 million low-income people will be affected by these cuts, including 450,000 residents in Dallas County that are food insecure. Almost 300,000 of them are children. Many of our citizens are already living on the edge of poverty, and these cuts would virtually eliminate the assistance they desperately need. I am deeply troubled by this aggressive agenda to dismantle the SNAP program. It is not just an African American and Hispanic populations who receive these benefits. It is the working class, the elderly, the children and disabled. Cutting this program would be devastating to millions of Americans who are working hard to provide for their families. I urge my colleagues to oppose this bill and support our neediest citizens. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. What purpose does the gentlelady from Missouri seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to speak against the discriminatory practice of the Southern Poverty Law Center through the use of so-called hate mapping and its proliferation of intolerance. While the group claims to be dedicated to fighting hatred and bigotry, the Southern Poverty Law Center has instead placed itself at the forefront of Christian persecution and religious intolerance. Because of its misplaced hate mapping, on August 15th of last year, Floyd Lee Corkins entered the Family Research Council and shot and badly wounded building manager Leo Johnson, who stopped Corkins' intended killing spree. The SPLC's radical intolerance of traditional values is not only hyperpolarizing, but spurred on this violence. Spreading discrimination against those who believe in traditional Christian values is not, in fact, fighting hatred. Rather, it is espousing further bigotry. Our country was founded on the principles of religious freedom. When the SPLC demonizes any group or person who remains steadfast in their religious convictions, it only increases the amount of intolerance in our society. So, I ask my fellow members to join me in fighting against religious intolerance in the world today by calling for an end to religious intolerance against all groups, including those with Christian beliefs.
Gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, please.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of our children suffering the unthinkable as we recognize September as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Cancer is a leading cause of death from disease among U.S. children over the age of 1. Moreover, cancer kills more children than cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, AIDS, asthma, and juvenile diabetes combined. There are many organizations doing good work to raise awareness, conduct research, treat children with cancer, including Roswell Park Cancer Institute and Women and Children's Hospital of Buffalo, who are working together in Western New York to cure our youngest cancer patients. Our children deserve to be cancer-free. They deserve the opportunity to be just kids and have a full life. They deserve a cure. We owe it to them and their families to make it happen by supporting strong federal investments in cancer research far beyond what we're doing today. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, as we debate SNAP reforms, I want to draw attention to recent analysis which shows that thousands of families avoid the need for public assistance because of private disability insurance benefits. Most of those covered by private disability insurance receive it from their employer. For a low premium, roughly $25 per month, workers receive 60% of their salary should they become disabled. With this benefit, the worker is able to provide for their families, pay bills, and buy food and medicines. Workers can then focus on recovery. A 2011 analysis by Charles River Associates highlights several things, like the fact that Americans underestimate the risk of becoming disabled. A few American households have the savings to withstand a loss of income. Because the income offered by disability insurance, the study estimates nearly 575,000 families avoid both poverty and public assistance each year. This translates into an annual $4.5 billion savings. If we could cover more workers, we can save tax dollars. Unfortunately, only about 1/3 of the workers have access to employer-sponsored disability insurance. We must raise awareness about both the risk of disability and the affordability of insurance. SNAP helps the needy, but a backup plan through insurers can provide generous assistance to the disabled and save taxpayer money. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it's no secret that we as a nation face tough choices on how to resolve our fiscal disagreements. But a government shutdown or a default is exactly the wrong answer. Every day, people all across our country figure out how to get their jobs done despite all sorts of disagreements. We must remember that compromise was the foundation of our Constitution and the cornerstone of our system of government. But for some reason, people here in Washington seem to have forgotten this most basic idea. My constituents in San Diego have worked too hard and struggled too much to fight through this economic downturn. The last thing they need is a government shutdown because some in Congress can't get their act together. Are we really going to let petty politics prevent us from doing the work to fund our government? Are we really going to stop processing of checks to our constituents, to our veterans, and to law enforcement? Mr. Speaker, a shutdown or a default is not governance. It's lunacy.
The gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the President has repeatedly boasted that last month the unemployment rate dropped to 7.3%, the lowest it has been in nearly 5 years. Mr. Speaker, although the rate has fallen for many, it is not because they found jobs, but rather because they've stopped looking for one and left the job market altogether. While the President has concentrated on this figure, other numbers simply cannot be ignored. There are still too many areas of the country where unemployment is far higher. For example, in 4 of the 9 counties which I represent in North Carolina, the unemployment rate is in double digits, and so is the national unemployment rate for folks 13 to 24-year-olds. Mr. Speaker, we should be doing what we can do to get people back to work and lighten their economic burden. Through increased taxes and regulations and overreaching health care law, this administration has done exactly the opposite and has continued to play politics rather than promote pro-growth policies. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor a great man, a legend in the community that I have the honor to represent, and a hero to our country, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Eugene Chisholm. Mr. Chisholm entered the military in 1942 and served 28 years, fighting for his country in World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam before retiring in 1971. He parachuted into Normandy on D-Day and fought in the Battle of the Bulge, as well as Operation Market Garden. He is a recipient of more than 20 service awards, which include 2 Presidential Unit Citations, a Purple Heart with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, and the Bronze Star. Lieutenant Colonel Chisholm's service did not end when he left the Army. He helped found the Roy Benavides Robert Patterson All-Airborne Chapter of the 82nd Airborne Division in El Paso, Texas, an important veterans service organization working in our community. Mr. Chisholm is a shining example of why his really is the greatest generation. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the food stamp bill today is a chance to reform the food stamp program, to decrease the waste, fraud, and abuse, and make sure people who need help get it. This week, 10 Baltimore businesses were indicted for stealing $7 million in food stamps. That's a travesty. One store, like the one pictured right here, defrauded the American taxpayer for $2 million. In fact, the Department of Agriculture found that over 10% of stores participating in the program are committing food stamp fraud. This bill reforms food stamps by cutting waste, fraud, and abuse by just 5%, cutting back on fraud like the second Obama Express store, and by making sure able-bodied adults are working, seeking work, or getting job training. Mr. Speaker, Republicans aren't trying to take food out of babies' mouths or make our seniors go hungry. Don't believe the scare tactics from my colleagues who oppose the bill. This is a common-sense reform that cuts waste, fraud, and abuse, leaving more money for the Americans who truly need help in time of need. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it's disheartening to stand here today once again to defend the meager nutritional assistance program we provide to families in America. The $40 billion in SNAP cuts put forward by the Republican majority is shameful. It's cruel and unusual punishment to Americans whose soft voices are barely ever heard in the halls of Congress. 3/4 of SNAP benefits go to families with children. And every week across this nation, there are parents who have to tell their kids, nope, there's nothing left to eat in our house tonight. I only wish my colleagues behind these despicable cuts had to deliver that message. I only wish that they had to say, I'm sorry, you've got to go to bed hungry. Unfortunately, my colleagues have it far too easy. They'll never know what it's like to be hungry. Their kids will never go to bed hungry. They can bring this heartless legislation to a vote without ever having to explain themselves to the families that they're hurting. Please don't let them get away with it. I yield back.
Yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in celebration of ABF Freight System's 90th birthday. Since its humble beginnings in 1923 as a local freight hauler, ABF has grown to employ 10,000 people in North America, with 1,000 in Arkansas alone, delivering freight worldwide. Today it continues to deliver value to its customers by developing and implementing customized solutions to global logistical challenges. It's fitting, Mr. Speaker, that this milestone coincides with National Truck Driver Appreciation Week. Last year, ABF, together with J.B. Hunt, the other great trucking companies that call Arkansas home, and the more than 3 million truck drivers in the United States, were responsible for hauling 68.5% of all U.S. freight tonnage. Without ABF and truck drivers throughout the nation, 80% of our communities that rely solely on trucking would not be able to access the goods on which they depend. Thank you to all of our truck drivers, and happy birthday, 90th birthday to ABF. And I yield back.
Yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks. Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
On Monday, just about a mile from here, once again our nation experienced a horrific incidence of mass gun violence. Our sympathies obviously go out to the friends and the families who lost loved ones in the shooting at the Washington Navy Yard. But as this chart shows, this mass shooting is only the latest in a long line that includes Columbine and Virginia Tech and Tucson and Aurora and Newtown. But even these horrendous mass killings don't fully reflect our nation's problem with gun violence. Each year, 100,000 people in America are shot by a gun, 30,000 die from a gun-related injury, 10,000 are murdered by a firearm. By 2015, gun-related deaths will surpass auto-related deaths for the first time. And while it's too early to know what might have prevented this week's mass shooting, we do know what will ensure that it will happen again. Doing nothing, business as usual. The chief medical officer at MedStar Hospital expressed the sentiments of many when she pleaded, there's something evil in our society that we as Americans all have to work to try and eradicate. If we don't do all we can to reduce gun violence through stronger laws and improved services, we'll all have to offer our constituents only more condolences. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, before the federal government got into health care, medical care was cheap and almost everyone could afford it. Doctors even routinely made house calls. When Medicare was passed, it was predicted that after 25 years it would cost only $12 billion. Instead, it cost 10 times that much. This year it will cost over $600 billion. All federal medical programs have cost many times more than was estimated on the front end. Already we read Obamacare is going to cost at least 2 or 3 times more than when it was estimated when it was passed. Federal medical programs make and have made a few people and companies very wealthy. However, they have made it so only multi-billionaires can pay what is being charged for medical care. Howard Dean, a former Democratic national chairman, says that Obamacare will cause health care to be rationed. The Unaffordable Care Act is taking us toward lower quality, shortages, waiting periods, and all at greater expense for medical care. It needs to be stopped before it makes our health care problems even worse than they now are. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition?
To address the House request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to the majority's unconscionable cuts to programs that help feed our nation's hungry. We are the wealthiest country in the world, yet nearly 15% of our population lives in poverty. In my home city of New York, over 50,000 people live in homeless shelters, and the number is growing. Our economy is making progress, but there are still millions of people who are struggling. Yet this proposal would kick off at least 4 million Americans from the SNAP program and increase poverty in our country. Women and children in particular bear the brunt of these cuts. 47% of SNAP recipients are children, and nearly 2/3 of the benefits go to women. Earlier this week, I saw firsthand how many families in our communities struggle to put food on the table when I visited our children's food pantry in Long Island City, Queens. The staff and volunteers of this private food bank, they are heroes and heroines, but we cannot rely on these organizations to pick up the slack. They say the participation is up 40%, defeat this major cut to nutrition to Americans that need this nutrition. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good jobs are hard to find these days. The gap between America's highest and lowest income families is wider than ever. American workers are on unemployment longer than at any time since World War II. A record 46 million Americans live in poverty. And what's the President's answer to these problems? He proposes driving forward on his prize achievement, Obamacare, even though it is already erasing jobs and reducing the work hours of taxpaying Americans. I've co-sponsored a resolution to keep the government open and defund Obamacare. House Republicans support these goals. We're going to defund Obamacare, and we're going to keep the government open at sensible spending levels. Americans shouldn't have to suffer through this failed experiment any longer, or have government operations held hostage by those unwilling to acknowledge that Obamacare is not working. Let's hope the President and his Senate allies agree. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, House Republicans are doubling down on a bad idea. These food stamp cuts will not only increase the incidence of hunger, but they'll result in the loss of thousands of jobs throughout the food industry alone. Because when poor families, children, the disabled, and the elderly can't afford food, they simply must go without. This is not economic stimulus. This is a national outrage. It's outrageous that 26 anonymous individuals received over $1 million each in farm subsidies, but $1.40 per meal for a hungry child is considered government waste. It's outrageous that some members of Congress are voting to enrich themselves with these special interests with farm subsidies and refusing benefits to millions of the neediest and most vulnerable Americans. I issued a report earlier this year that detailed 14 members of Congress who are collectively worth up to $124 million, who received $7.2 million in farm subsidies, and yet they voted to cut a nutrition allowance for working poor families and children. Imagine that. And in honor of the chair, let me just say, that's just the way it is.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from Indiana seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support today of the House plan to hold a vote on a continuing resolution to fund the government and defund Obamacare. This straightforward approach achieves two objectives: keeps the lights on in the federal government while halting an unworkable law. The list of problems with Obamacare gets longer every day. This law was passed in 2010. But just since last week, I'd like to share 3 examples that negatively impact my district and the state of Indiana. Yesterday, just 12 days before the full implementation, the White House warned Americans of quote-unquote massive fraud triggered by Obamacare, causing identity theft and cybersecurity leaks. Last week, Indiana University reported they're laying off 50 workers and sending them to a temp agency because of Obamacare. This includes graduate students who are having their hours cut to stay under the 30-hour threshold. The Indy Star reported that over 200,000 Hoosiers are impacted by higher insurance rates under Obamacare. The list is getting longer and the problem is getting worse. The House plan is similar to legislation penned by my colleague, Mr. Tom Graves, which has already been co-sponsored by 79 members of Congress. I'm confident the House will work its will to pass this legislation to reflect the wishes of the American people. Next, it's time for the Senate to step up and do the same.
The gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask consent to address the House floor for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to condemn yet another manufactured crisis that House leadership has created. Americans are sick and tired of fighting and fighting again, of having their economic security put on the line repeatedly. Instead of doing their jobs and serving the people, House leadership is holding the American people hostage to partisan politics and taking us down a path to a government shutdown. That means our military serving overseas could have to work without pay. While they're sacrificing for us, their families are going to struggle and they're going to worry about their families. It means benefits to our veterans. Veterans that are already struggling to get benefits in a backlog are going to have to wait longer for those benefits. And it means Americans who count on Social Security, a program that they've paid into their whole life, may not be able to get their payments. This is absolutely shameful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the clock is ticking. We've got 11 days. Let's do what's right and begin to work on a real budget, a budget that creates jobs, that secures a strong middle class, and starts to reduce our debt and the burden on the next generation. 11 days, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we have an opportunity to win a victory for common sense. For decades, business as usual fostered an unholy alliance between food stamps and farm policy. Year after year, Washington spent money that it never had. This summer, the House considered a $1 trillion welfare bill that was a farm bill in name only. Taxpayers had seen enough. The American people were able to defeat business as usual by insisting that both food stamps and farm policy be considered individually and on their own merits. It's just common sense. Finally, we passed a farm-only farm bill that ended direct payments. Today, we can continue that work by passing a food stamp bill that doubles the savings that the House originally considered. Mr. Speaker, this bill eliminates loopholes, ensures work requirements, and puts us on a fiscally responsible path. In the real world, we measure success by results. It's time for Washington to measure success by how many families are lifted out of poverty and helped back on their feet, not by how much Washington bureaucrats spend year after year. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition? The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak in opposition to the drastic cuts proposed to the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program known as SNAP. The SNAP program helps millions of Americans in need, including 16% of the residents of my state, put food on the table, provide for their families, and get back on their feet. This is a sad day because the House will soon vote to cut $40 billion, an enormous amount, from the SNAP program. But this isn't about government programs. It's not even about dollars. It's about 6 million Americans. It's about dismantling a highly effective program that my home state has used to get people back to work. In these tough economic times, we should be helping folks get back on their feet. And we shouldn't be asking the least fortunate among us to shoulder the burden for a Congress that can't get its act together and pass a budget. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Why should there be hunger and deprivation in any land, in any city, at any table, when man has the resources and the scientific know-how to provide all mankind with the basic necessities of life? There is no deficit of human resource. The deficit is human will." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition?
I seek recognition to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Majority Leader and the Tea Party caucus have been railing against providing sufficient SNAP funding that provides food to the hungry. This is certainly not something to be proud of, and I've never understood making scapegoats out of the most vulnerable Americans. The majority has been holding up passing bills to keep our country afloat in 2014 because they want to demonize ordinary Americans who are struggling to make ends meet. The Republican majority seems to enjoy the company of the very wealthy who are eating cake while casting aside those who've been really singed economically. So let me propose a deal. Let's transfer out 3 of the massive government buildings in Virginia that employ thousands of people in the Majority Leader's 7th Congressional District of Virginia, and let's move those jobs to Ohio's 9th Congressional District. Culpeper's loss would be Cleveland's gain. After we strike this deal, we in Ohio will enjoy the guaranteed jobs and income flows to which the 7th District of Virginia has grown accustomed. We can cash in on the regular flow of funds to the Majority Leader's district that he takes for granted, including being the #1 state for federal procurement in the whole country. Let's harmonize Ohio's unemployment rate with Virginia's. And I urge my colleagues to vote no on the Majority Leader's harsh, let-them-eat-dirt proposal.
Time has expired.
He lives in an insulated economy.
Time has expired.
Ohio does not.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
We want responsible government that values every citizen. Mr. Speaker, I yield back my remaining
Gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in honor and remembrance of Mr. Jerry Russell, a man dedicated to his family and his community who passed away on September the 5th, 2013. Mr. Russell was a generous man who committed his life to the Fort Worth theater community for 35 years. A Rhode Island native, Mr. Russell made his home in Fort Worth, Texas in 1973. It was there that he left his job, a well-paying job at National Cash Register, to pursue his career and dream, and he started Stage West Theater in 1978. Mr. Russell led Stage West by taking risks and never giving up on what became one of the early foundations of the Fort Worth theatrical community. Now Stage West is a major supporter of local theater performance and the arts in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. While he did not attend college, he became a theater teacher at my alma mater of Texas Wesleyan University, where he spread his love and passion for theater to his students. He was a major supporter for the development and funding of the arts in Texas schools and communities. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in his spare time outside of the theater, when he found it, he loved rooting for the Texas Rangers. Go Rangers. He will always be regarded as a true talent and benefactor to not only the Fort Worth community, but the state of Texas. I offer my condolences to his friends and family. In addition to his wife, Susie McLaughlin, he leaves his 5 children behind: Christopher Neal Russell, Joe Russell, Kathy Russell, Jennifer Russell James, and my friend, Texas Senator Wendy Davis. He also leaves his legacy behind with 11 beautiful grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren. May he rest in peace, and his legacy and contributions to the arts never be forgotten. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on September 19, 2013 at 11:39 a.m. Appointments. Public Interest Declassification Board. Signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 351 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 54, House Resolution 351, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 687 to facilitate the efficient extraction of mineral resources in southeast Arizona by authorizing and directing an exchange of federal and non-federal land and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources now printed in the bill. The committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of the substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order, except those printed in Part A of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2. At any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 1526 to restore employment and educational opportunities in and improve the economic stability of counties containing National Forest System land, while also reducing Forest Service management costs by ensuring that such counties have a dependable source of revenue from National Forest System land, to provide a temporary extension of the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act of 2000 and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the Text Rules Committee Print 113-21, modified by the amendment printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution, shall be considered as adopted in the House and in the Committee of the Whole. The bill as amended shall be considered as the original bill for the purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in Part C of the report of the Committee on Rules. Each such further amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such further amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill as amended to the House with such further amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended, and any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 3. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 3102 to amend the Food and Nutrition Act of 2008 and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and on any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Agriculture, and 2, one motion to recommit.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations to the clerk for the long reading of the rule. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman, my friend from Worcester, Massachusetts, my dear friend, and spent a lot of time with him yesterday, the gentleman, Mr. McGovern, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, and the gentleman from Texas is recognized for as much time as he wishes to use.
During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
House Resolution 351 provides for a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 687 and H.R. 1526 and provides a closed rule for consideration of H.R. 3102. Mr. Speaker, the first of these bills is H.R. 687, the Southeast Arizona Land Exchange and Conservation Act. This bill permits a land conveyance which will lead to the development of important copper deposits in Arizona that is estimated to create 3,700 jobs and $60 billion worth of economic opportunity. That is a great reason to be on the floor on behalf of the Republican Party of the United States of America. We are on the floor today because people in Arizona, on a bipartisan basis, have asked that their elected representatives on a bipartisan basis come to the United States government and ask for swapping lands that will result in 3,700 American jobs, probably about 3,700 jobs in Arizona, and up to $60 billion worth of economic opportunity. What a great reason for Paul Gosar and Doc Hastings, the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, to approach the Rules Committee about getting that bill on the floor today. We hear over and over and over and over about jobs and job creation in the middle class. Well, let me tell you what, Mr. Speaker, 3,700 jobs for the middle class in Arizona and up to $60 billion worth of economic opportunity are available to members of Congress today where they can make a decision about what they want to vote on. I would submit to you the Republican Party is for those 3,700 middle-class jobs. The second bill before us today is H.R. 1526, the Restoring Healthy Forest for Healthy Communities Act. And this legislation will improve the health of our nation's forest by promoting effective forest management while simultaneously strengthening a timber sales revenue sharing program which is once again designed to allow rural communities to benefit from their local natural resources. I will go back and say it again. The reason why we are on the floor today is that the Republican Party wants local rural communities to have a part of their cost sharing with the money that would come in to help rural communities to benefit from what sits in their own backyard, their own natural resources, which, as we as Republicans understand, is best admired and best taken care of when local people take care of their own needs. Point two, why the Republican Party is on the floor of the House of Representatives today: for local rural communities. The final bill considered in this rule is H.R. 3102, the Nutrition Reform and Work Opportunity Act. This vital legislation reforms, and I add the word reforms because it needs reform, reforms our nation's nutrition programs, saving taxpayers about $40 billion while maintaining critical benefits to helping America's neediest families, seniors, children, and veterans. H.R. 3102 reinforces our country's commitment to those who cannot help themselves while working to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. What is the waste, fraud, and abuse? It is many, many people who should not be receiving these needy items that should be reserved for those who need it the most by people who are able-bodied, and we should not extend those benefits to people who actually can take care of themselves. So, you're going to hear a robust argument today that will took place for hours yesterday in the Rules Committee as we considered amendments after amendments, ideas after ideas, and each and every person, whether they be Republican or Democrat, were treated with fairness and opportunity to equally present their ideas with the knowledge that there was a committee, the Rules Committee, on a bipartisan basis that was available and ready to engage each of those members on their ideas that are called amendments, and that is why we are on the floor of the House of Representatives today. I urge my colleagues to support the rule. We'll talk a little bit more about it, and to support the underlying legislation. And of course, we will talk about that more during this hour, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Texas, my friend, the chairman of the committee, Mr. Sessions, for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is a sad day in the People's House. Today, the Republican leadership is bringing to the floor one of the most heartless pieces of legislation I have ever seen, a bill to take food away from some of our most vulnerable neighbors. After a $20 billion cut was voted down by the House in June, the Republican leadership has decided to double down on the cruelty with a $40 billion cut. It is terrible policy wrapped in a terrible process. This is a 109-page bill that would gut the SNAP program, cut billions of dollars, and make major changes to the way SNAP works. And there hasn't been a single hearing, not a single markup. It didn't even go through the Agriculture Committee, and today it's being brought to the floor under a closed rule. It was just cooked up in the Majority Leader's office as some sort of Heritage Foundation fever dream. CBO says that the bill would cut 3.8 million low-income people from SNAP in 2014 and millions more in the following years. These are some of America's poorest adults, as well as many low-income children, seniors, and families that work for low wages. Let me say that again, Mr. Speaker, so there's no confusion. People who work but who don't make enough to feed their families will be cut from this program. The biggest cut affects millions of unemployed, childless adults who live in areas of high unemployment. These are poor people. Many don't have the skills or education they need to find a job. It is a group whose average income is about $2,500 a year. $2,500 a year. And for most, SNAP is the only government assistance that they receive. Now, if that weren't bad enough, 210,000 children in these families would also lose their free school meals. And 170,000 unemployed veterans will lose their SNAP benefits as well. Let me repeat, 170,000 veterans will lose their benefits. These are the people who have served our country. How can you do that? Mr. Speaker, we are 45 years and a million miles away from the war on poverty. The Republican leadership has instead launched a war on poor people. This bill is not about reform. It is not about making SNAP a better, stronger program. Mr. Speaker, it is not easy to be poor in America. It is not a glamorous life. It is a struggle just to make it through the day. The average SNAP benefit is $1.50 per meal. Housing costs, transportation costs, child care costs they all add up. You know, fighting hunger used to be a bipartisan issue. Think of people like Bob Dole and Bill Emerson. And I know that a lot of Republicans, moderates and conservatives, are very nervous about this bill. So I would say to them, don't do this. Please don't do this. Don't go along with cutting food benefits to millions of struggling families. Don't make hundreds of thousands of children and seniors and veterans go hungry. Don't put the food banks and church pantries in your districts into an even deeper hole. The people who rely on SNAP to feed their families struggle every single day. Please don't make their lives even harder. It is not too late. We do not need to pass this bill in order to go to conference on the Farm Bill. I would urge my colleagues to search their consciences and to vote against this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.